I really wasn't going to speak about this situation because I'm not much of a sports guy myself, but I'm never going to miss a good opportunity to use as a teaching lesson and to expose systematic racism, white supremacy, and the whole ShedeurSanders thing of them stalling him out in terms of the draft. This was done to show a nigga his place because in the system of racism, white supremacy, they don't like feeling like they got an uppity Negro on their hands or one that has become too big for their britches at the end of the day. This is why I don't rock with sports, at all, but especially football, it's ran, with white overseers. It's ran much like the plantation, truth be told, where white people sitting around profiting off of black people's blood, sweat, and tears. And in the system of racism, white supremacy, they love a story that reads good in mainstream news headlines, such as them taking a black male from the projects being raised by a single parent and him having, not much, at his disposal in terms of resources and him coming into the football league and them giving him everything. They love, making black icons. So at the end of the day, they can break them. And in the case of our brother ShedeurSanders, they can't do this with him because he comes from black excellence, black prominence, and wealth. And they don't like that, and they trying to say that he's cocky, this, that, and the other. It's not about him being cocky. It's about, them not making him. So, at the end of the day, he's self-made, and they don't like when a black person is self-made at the end of the day. And most of these sports sectors, the people controlling it, everything from the coaches to the owners of, these NFL teams especially, but all sports sectors this applies to, at the top is a bunch of nothing but anti, black white supremacists, running and controlling these things. This is why I say we need to get our own sports teams, our own everything, so we can control our own narrative, to where though we're not sitting around, at the disposal of white supremacy so they can have their way and do whatever under the sun they want to do to us. Because everyone knows our brother ShedeurSanders should have been number one draft pick. Even I know that, and I don't watch sports like that. Like I said, I'm not about sports, but to each his own. And I'm never going to miss out on a good teaching lesson, to expose systematic racism, white supremacy, and injustice, and this is what this was a case of here, injustice, and in terms of, that suspected white supremacist, the young kid, that was one of the coach's sons that was calling, trolling, and pranking our brother ShedeurSanders. They was all in cahoots on this, and because ShedeurSanders said himself, he ain't give this, number out to nobody but people that wanted to recruit him. So what else could it been? They was all in cahoots, and NFL insider as a recent came out and said, that the coaches and the team's owners, they was all in cahoots basically on stalling him out, because they felt that they had an uppity Negro on their hands. They didn't say it like that. They just said cocky, but they saying that to uh, put it out there, as just him being cocky. But what they wish they could say is that they had an uppity Negro on their hand, that they wanted to break him, break his spirits, and stall him out. That's all this was a case of. And this is why I say that we need our own institutions to where though we can control our own narratives, especially as foundational Black Americans, because that was a bunch of nonsense that they pulled on ShedeurSanders, because in all actuality, they love a story where they can, take a black person from rags to riches, so whenever they want, black people are just laying around at their disposal. They can break them at the drop of a dime. But in the case of ShedeurSanders, um, black prominence, black wealth, black excellence. So they can't do this with our brother. So that's why they mad at the end of the day. And in closing, this was, less about ShedeurSanders and more about systematic racism, white supremacy. Them feeling that they had an uppity Negro on their hands that had become too big for his britches. Even the NFL insider said that. Just my thoughts on the matter, but that's all this was a case of. Them feeling that they had an uppity Negro on their hands and them wanting to assert the white supremacy pecking order over him and show him how things are done. And I don't rock with that whole narrative, nor do I agree with it. And ShedeurSanders now has been drafted, to my understanding. Any of the family can correct me if I'm wrong, but he has, as a recent been drafted by the Cleveland Browns. And because I don't know much about sports, but I do know he's going to take that team all the way to the top. Just my thoughts on the matter. Peace.